Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Yogi Roth, and I couldn't be more excited to be here for the Power of Positive Summit for the second year in a row. For all the speakers, thanks for coming. I'm learning so much from you. And for all the people involved in the conversation, thanks for taking the time with us. It's been an absolute blast. But today I wanted to bring you to a place closest to my heart to have this conversation, and it's right here in the middle of a football field. And for me, a football field shaped everything about me. And for some of you, maybe it was a basketball floor, maybe it was a golf course, maybe it was a pitch, maybe it was a baseball diamond, maybe it was a tennis court, maybe it was an office, maybe it was just running trails in the woods. But I think a lot of people at this conference are athletically minded, and sport allows us to go places. It allows us to create confidence. It allows us to be positive, right? It allows us to go to a dark place. It allows us to explore who we are and what we're all about. And to me, there's a beautiful pageantry to that. It also has a dark side, right? It breaks our heart, always. The sport tells us, when it's done with us for the most part, at least as a performer, we have to find another way or another avenue to get involved. And over the last year, I've been asking a lot of athletically minded people and high performers the same simple question of what does it mean to be human? And the answers have never been the exact same. People have a wide variety of views on what it means to be human. But overall, if I was going to chunk all those into one theme, I believe that everyone I've talked to about this idea of what does it mean to be human, it means to go for it. It means to play big. And ultimately, what I think we are taught on the fields, on the courts, wherever we like to perform, is we are taught that we have the ability to do two things. We can love. We can love our craft, we can love our ball, we can love our thing more than we can love anything else. And we give our entire world to the beauty of this sport. And we also are given the gift of instinct. Never once do you catch your pass and say, I'm gonna go left, I'm gonna go right, then I'm gonna spin move. You go boom, 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 spin move, and hopefully it's a first down or a touchdown. You're gonna spike a volleyball. It's never, okay, this is how I can set it up. You just react because you're trained so much. And I think as we get older, sometimes we lose that love and we lose that instinct. An analogy for me as I look at the USC pool right behind me in the high dive is that as a child, we jump off these high dives, hands in the air, screaming as loud as we can, smiles on our face, and as we get older, we start to think about the negative consequences instead of the positive possibilities. And all of a sudden it's, let me take it down a notch. You know what, let me just jump off that little dive. And ultimately we find ourselves going down the ladder into the shallow part of the pool. How boring is that? But more importantly, how far away from our instinct, from our field, is that idea? Today in the Power Positive Summit, I'd like to share 3 simple stories about when I was challenged with love and instinct, sometimes responded and sometimes didn't. The first story was a couple years ago, and I had the really unique opportunity to work for Entertainment Tonight. And we were working the red carpet. I never worked the red carpet, didn't even understand really the red carpet and all the logistics around it. And here we are, and I had the opportunity to interview anyone and everyone in Hollywood and sports. And at first, they wanted me to ask people what they were wearing, all the standard red carpet questions, or if you're a performer, would you rather be a Grammy Award winner or a Super Bowl champion? It was pretty boring, to be quite honest. And I looked at my producer and I said, I don't think we're getting a lot from these guests. And he said, man, I couldn't agree more. And this is my first day on the job. And I said, can I just ask what I'm interested in? He said, please, man, anything to make this experience any better for the people that are coming up here and probably for him as well. So I apologize, man, for making that day probably a miserable one for you. But all of a sudden, my questions started to shift, and I started to trust my heart, started to trust my instinct. And that day, if you can remember a couple years ago at the ESPYs, Michael Sam was being honored and Stuart Scott was being honored. If you know me at all, one of the biggest things I'm passionate about is ending homophobia in sports, and also cancer and finding a cure for it, and making sure that we can share some of those stories around those 2 ideals. And that's exactly what happened. The night ended, we had 2 features. One was on Michael Sam, one was on Stuart Scott. They were impassioned, they were empathetic, and for me, they were extremely vulnerable. But that was where my heart was, and that's what my instinct had told me to do. But I fought it. And ultimately, when that night began, I was walking down the ladder into the shallow end. And by the end of the evening, thankfully, I was jumping off the high dive. A couple years ago, some of you may have seen the short film, or the film I did called Life in a Walk. And long story short, our dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And at the time, I was caught up in my sport, and then I was caught up in my craft of the entertainment world. And I was running from audition to audition, meeting to meeting, and my parents would call. I would answer, but I'd be doing emails, or I'd be texting at the same time, and I wasn't necessarily present. I wasn't trusting my instinct, and I truly wasn't loving. And it hit me between the eyes one day, as my friends started to lose the people closest to them, that I never wanted to say the sentence, "I wish I spent more time with my dad." That was my instinct, and that was my heart. 2 days later, I flew to Brooklyn, where our sister had lived at the time, and I walked into her apartment, and I asked our dad if he would go for a walk. He said, "Sure," thinking we'd probably go around the block. I gave him a plane ticket, and I said, "Let's go walk what is known as the Camino de Santiago, one of the most famous pilgrimages in the entire world." And away we went. And for me, my life was changed. Literally, every cell in my soul was altered, because I got back to my love. I got back to my instinct, just like we do with our nieces or nephews, or if we're fortunate enough to have kids. When they're 6 and they're 7 and they're 8, they just ask these questions, and like Buddha would say, right, they have this childlike fascination, and they don't worry about anything else. They're jumping off the hideout without even realizing it. Thankfully for me, I was forced into that moment. I was forced to love and get back to my instinct. It was the greatest gift in my entire life. My final story happened only a couple weeks ago. I went to my homeland, right? I went to Israel, the epicenter of love, the epicenter of passion, and a very conflicted community. When we're talking about, you go into Jerusalem in the old city, and it's Christian, it's Jewish, it's Arabic, it's Muslim, literally within yards of one another. And as I walked around this community, we shot a short film that I'll be sure to share with all of you called "What Does It Mean to Love?" And I asked all of these people from different backgrounds, different colors, both genders, multiple, variety of different ages, all the same simple question of what does it mean to love? And it was as though their answers were literally speaking into my heart and into my soul. And late that one evening, I do this tradition when I go on any of my trips, I leave my shoes. And I left my shoes on the beaches in Tel Aviv, and I sat there and I thought about this recent trip and this film that we just shot. And I looked back on the last couple years of my life and every story I've tried to tell as a storyteller. And I started to laugh to myself, and I realized that everyone revolved around love. And every one of my trips, or every time I get in the broadcast booth, anytime I make a statement, it's revolved around instinct, because I've done the preparation, the lonely work, to get myself to this place where I can trust the thing that was built right here in a field. So as I end this Power of Positive Summit, and thank you for your time, I think the challenge for all of us is, can we get back to our love? Can we get back to our instinct? Can we know our voice so well that when it's off kilter just a little bit, it feels so uncomfortable, like it did for me that night when I was on the red carpet? Can we be so shaken that we accept that vulnerability and ask the people that we care most about to go for a simple walk, to reconnect to that love, and ask the questions that our heart is pondering? And the worst thing in the world would be to not ask those specific instinctual questions. And then, of course, can we take the time every 6 months, every year, however often it works for you, to pause, take a moment and say, okay, am I loving? Am I instinctual? What does it truly mean for me to be human? I think the answers can vary, but ultimately I think we'd agree upon that it means to go for it. It means to play big. It means to leap. Of course, it means to go off the high dive. It means to trust ourselves like we've never trusted anything. And of course, love as freely as humanly possible. I thank you for the time. It's been an honor. Thanks for coming to my field. I'm looking forward to learning about yours. Peace.